Okay, let's get started. I am opening up Unity and creating a new project. Don't worry if yours doesn't look exactly like this. This may be just because I'm using a different version. I'm also using Unity Hub, which allows me to create projects with different versions of Unity, because certain plugins work better with different versions, or I might have been working on an older project on a different version, but I've got a different project that's on a different version of Unity, and so I still want access to those versions of Unity, but the hub allows me to access those. But I'm just creating a new project. You should still have the same sort of stuff. So whether it's 2D or a 3D project, so this is a clicker game, so it's just going to be 2D. We want to give the project a name, so I'm just going to call this Cookie Clicker. I'm going to use all one word as well. Clicker clone underscore version 0.1, and in terms of location, mine is set to my Q drive, which is my 1TB hard drive, which is separate from my C drive. If you are using the rooms in the PC lab, you should also look and see which drive to use. Don't save it to your university sort of networked account, because you are only going to be allocated so much storage space there, and you'll quickly fill it up if you are saving your Unity projects and Maya models and things like that, and video files or whatever. That's quickly going to be too much. You're not going to be able to maintain it. So save it to the hard drive in the PC that you're using, and then just make sure you save that somewhere else at the end to back it up, because that will be accessible by anybody who uses that PC. So just be aware of that. So that's fine with this. I am going to then click create. Okay, so Unity has opened up with my new project. I've got all I've got is the main camera object within the scene. That's all we can see. My assets folder is completely empty. You should have already been shown this, so I'm not going to go through what's the hierarchy, what's the inspector do, what's project, what are all these buttons for, how do I navigate this. You should have some familiarization with this already, so if you haven't, then maybe you need to go back over some older tutorials. What we're going to do with this is we're going to design this game so the target platform is going to be for mobile devices. So because of how many different resolutions of mobile device there are, we're just going to have to look at what's a common one, and also we're going to make the game in sort of portrait mode, as if we're holding the phone upright. That's the kind of layout we're going to make for this game, or at least that's what I'm going to use. You can do whatever you want. Feel free to deviate from this video however you like. So a typical aspect ratio size for mobile devices is 16:9. I'm not going to go through ratio stuff right now, but basically if we want to change the display of our game, this is currently the scene view, so this is the view in which we edit stuff, we move things around, objects, etc. In the scene. The game view is how the game actually looks. So I'm just going to drag this window over here, not that way, I'll drag it over there. So now I've got my scene view, which is where I'm editing the game, and then this is what the player will actually see on this side. Notice how at the minute, if I change the size of the game view, it changes the size of the actual camera on here. So this is because I've got the view set to free aspect, so it's not a set resolution. So because of that, we're not designing for a specific resolution yet. It just allows us to move it around. However, not really ideal. What we want to do is change this aspect ratio. We could go with 16:9, perfect, but this is horizontal, and we want a sort of vertical. So now that I've done that, you'll notice that even if I change the size of this, it maintains that aspect ratio. So I know that whatever changes I make, or when I'm editing, it's not going to be affected if I change the size of this window, which it might have done in free aspect. But we don't want horizontal. We want it to be portrait. So I'm going to add well, I've already got one here, mobile 180 by 320, so that's quite a low resolution because I love pixel art, and so that's the resolution of the clicker clone that I'm going to make. But if you want to add your own, you just click add, call it something. So I called mine mobile, give it a type, and then width and height, however many pixels you want it to be. I'll link to some information about aspect ratios so you can have a look and decide for yourself what kind of information you want in there. So I'm just going to click before, which was 180 by 320. So now I've got this set up. I'm going to reduce this window slightly. Make sure you can still see my stupid face in the corner of the video. And I'm going to zoom in on both of these as well, so I've got my play space. So now I'm happy with the resolution of the game. I'm going to start adding some stuff into the scene. So the game is going to function using UI elements known as buttons primarily. So for a clicker game, I need to be able to click stuff and then click other things to upgrade things within my game. So I'm going to be using button elements. So what we're going to do is add our button that we're going to click for when we want to generate. So it's cookie clicker clone, but I like pizza, so I'm going to make a pizza clicker game. So I'm going to generate pizzas with mine. So right click in the hierarchy. Let's go to UI and then down to button. So nothing's happened yet. So Unity has this weird way of working with UI elements. So it won't just add it into our camera's vision in the sort of view here. UI is like a separate entity to anything that we edit in the actual game scene. It's sort of an extra layer on top. So whatever we edit in our scene view, the UI stuff just goes on top of all that sort of stuff. So you'll notice though that we've added in some stuff over here. It's added in a canvas, the button, which is our UI element that we added. The button also has some text attached to it. It's also added this thing called an event system. So don't worry about the event system for now. It just needs to have that when we add a UI. So if we added any UI element, it will, unless we already have a canvas and an event system, it will add those automatically. So our button, nowhere to be seen, but we've got a canvas. So the canvas is this, it has added in this weird white line. So if we zoom out of our editor view quite significantly, you'll notice there's a random button down there, and we also have this canvas UI object, which is the same aspect ratio as our game view, and even though the scene view down here is where the game would be edited if we were adding in sprites or other assets, here, because it's UI based, it's on this sort of separate canvas. So it's sort of these two separate spaces where we can edit things. So the button, which is down here, if I want that to be visible in the game, I'm just going to click and drag that up, and you'll notice that in the player's view here, you can now actually see the button itself. What you can do is, when you've got the button clicked, you can go through some of the information about the button itself here. You can change some things. So there's the button's colour. So pizza, maybe like a red kind of colour for pizza. You can change image type, all this kind of other kind of stuff. So just play around with that kind of stuff. I'm not going to go into too much detail. One thing I will say though is that if you want to edit the text, you'll notice that there's no option in here to edit that. That's because the text is a separate UI element, but it's just attached to this button. You'll remember when we click this drop down over here, we've got a text element. So if I click that, that's actually the text that's associated with this button. That is because you might want to specifically reference the text and change it on a button for some reason. So it's a separate entity, but it's just attached to this button. So for text, we'll just make it say, make pizza. and an exclamation mark. And then the colour of the text down here, I'm just going to change mine to white just to make it a bit more visible. Okay, I'm happy with that. Mine looks pixelated because it's low resolution. Yours may not look like this, depending on what size of canvas, what size of screen you're making for. Back to the button. This stuff at the top, the rect transform stuff, so it's to do with this object that's down here, that's in the center. So this item, basically, because games export at different resolutions, the positioning of this button will change depending on what our screen is doing. So say for example, okay, I put my button here at the top of the screen. It's using this this anchor as a point of reference for where it will place that button. So it'll go, right, well, I'm going to look in the middle of the screen, and then however many pixels upwards is where I'm going to put that button. If I just change back to aspect ratio for a second, and drop down this and just reduce the size of this, the pizza, this is the, hang on, so that's the full sort of size of the game in aspect ratio. So the central point will change depending on the size of the window. So I can make adjustments to the width, and the pizza button stays in the center. But if I make adjustments to height, it starts to sort of push it up off the screen. So that's because it's going, okay, this is the central point, I'm just going to add this much to the top of it. So hopefully that kind of explains. It's you way you want to think about it is that if this screen is scaled, how do I want this button to position itself? So it may be better to position the anchor for the button at the top of the screen, so I can pop it up there, and then I might want to say, well, I want it to be at the top of the screen, and I want it to be roughly around there. So this way, even if I make the button longer or whatever, reduce the size of it, it's still going to be visible. It's not going to change. And if I head back to that, it's just sort of still in an okay place. And it doesn't matter if we change the resolution to, I don't know, horizontal. It's still in an okay place. It's still central, but it's just using that top point rather than the middle. So have a play around with that. I'll link to some additional information. Next, we also want to add. So we've got the button to click, but we want to display the number that will count upwards every time we click this button. So we need to add another UI element, and this is going to be similar to how the text is associated with this button. We want to add a text UI element, but we don't want it to be associated with anything. So I'm just going to right click in here, UI text. So it's added in some text. And this is it here, so we can drag that around and pop it where we want. So I'm going to use this top point. Again, I might just move that up there so it uses the same point. I'm going to put it right at the top, and the text it will display, I'm just going to put a bunch of zeros just to say that this is going to be a number. We're going to update this with scripts anyway, so it doesn't really matter what it says, but I can get a rough idea of how it's going to look when I'm putting in a number. I might even want to put in something like 1, 2, 3, 4 just to get an idea. But yeah, I might increase the font size for this. I could change the fonts, etc. But I'm not going to. I'm just going to leave it for now. I am going to centralize it. That's a word, I'm pretty sure. And yeah, I'm going to just do that, I think. One other thing I'm going to do before we move on is I am going to rename these elements, because I'm soon going to be adding in more buttons and more text. So if you look here, this and this text and this text are the same, they're called the same. So if I want to reference this from a script or look for it when I might have more objects along here, I might want to search for that specific text element. If there's a bunch called the same thing, I'm going to struggle. So with my button, I'm going to rename this. So I could either right click and rename, or I could just rename it up here in the inspector. And I'm going to call this, I'm going to preface it with UI, and then it's a button. What does the button do? The game is about clicking, so this is, I'm just going to call it UI button click. So that's the name of that. The text that's associated with it. So it is important to have naming conventions, and the reason why that is because your game might have a lot of things in it that are named similar things, or you might have a 3D model of a character called, I don't know, Bob. You might have a static mesh for Bob. You might have animations related to Bob. You might have sounds that are linked to Bob. You might have materials and textures for Bob. But if they're all called Bob, then you're not going to know which is which. So I try to sort of preface mine with, just noticed I've added a new text thing somewhere. Let's get rid of that, don't need that. I try to preface mine initially with, what is it? I've also spelled button wrong. Let's update that. I want to preface mine with, what is it? And what does it do? As much information I can give myself or someone else if I'm working on a project with multiple people. So this is UI button click. I'm going to rename this one UI text button click. Just close with that. So I know, okay, it's a UI element, it's a text element, and it's for the button that you click on. For this one, I'm going to call this one, again, I'll use the same format, UI, text, and then this is going to be our pizza counter. So that's going to count the number of pizzas. We're set up, ready to add some scripts in the next video.